What is... What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is now on HBO Max and will be in theaters this weekend. We're going to talk about it spoiler-free, of course. I was very excited for this film because I love the other two Conjuring movies. Does this one measure up? So, the Warrens investigate a murder that may be linked to a demonic possession. A chilling story of terror, murder, and unknown evil that shocked even experienced real-life paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. So, based on a true story, as the other films have been, this marks the first time in U.S. history that a murder suspect would claim demonic possession as a defense. So, I found that concept to be very exciting. I knew a little bit about this, but was excited to explore this a bit deeper. And of course, we have Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson returning in some of the most iconic roles in horror history. And like I said, I really love the first two Conjuring movies. The first one blew me away in theaters. The second one, even rewatching both of them this week, very impressed by that one as well. So both of them work extremely well. Now, the Conjuring franchise as a whole, I'm literally split down the middle on. I think 4 of the films are kind of weak. I think the other 4 films either work or work on an extremely high level. And I'm going to throw The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It in that good category. I actually found quite a bit to like about this sequel. Now, I was worried, and I'll fully admit that. I thought the fact that James Wan not returning to direct this was going to lower the quality quite a bit. And while the quality may not be as high as the previous 2 Conjuring films, it's still there. You can still feel the James Wan-isms. Is that a term? We're going to coin that phrase right now. They're here, absolutely, even though Michael Chavez directs this film. Now, he was the director of La Llorona, and I wasn't a big fan of that movie. So I was very hesitant going into this third film. And you have the fact that James Wan, even though helping write the script is always a really good thing, just not being behind the camera, well, are we still going to get that incredible cinematography? Are we going to get these really nice editing techniques that allows the first 2 films to stand out from a very crowded genre? They're not quite as abundant as the previous 2 movies, but he does a really good job behind the camera, and I was impressed with this direction along with the screenplay, which does somewhat start to lose itself about halfway through the movie, and we'll talk about negatives here in just a second. But we have some new writers this time around. James Wan, he's back, but this time David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick is part of that duo working on the screenplay. And then our main character of Arnie is a fascinating character who is conjuring, that's a pun, the confidence to go in front of everyone and claim that the devil made me do it. Now, we're seeing everything go down, and we understand that, yeah, the devil made him do it. But how do you convince everyone else of that? And it's up to the Warrens to come in and try their best to find the evidence to prove that this is the case. But while that's happening, the Warrens are dealing with something all their own, kind of like they did in the second film, but this time there is something else at play. I don't want to spoil what, but something that we've not seen in the trio of Conjuring movies thus far, and it feels like the stakes are even elevated more so than they have been, because Ed is also dealing with some physical problems. He's having some heart issues, and that adds this human element in a world full of spiritual consequences, that of which we see an abundance of in this movie. But there's a very human element in there because his health is at risk. And you could argue that Lorraine's health is at risk as well, because she's actually led to do a few things in this movie that almost cause her at numerous points throughout the film to find herself in physical harm. Now, this movie also starts out on a very different note because we're going right into this demonic possession. David Glatzel plays young Julian, this little boy who's having to go through and experience this. I thought the VFX were fantastic in this scene, and it's as haunting of an opening as we've gotten from any of the movies in this universe. So it got off to a really great start, and then you're starting to discover that this demonic entity has kind of transferred itself from David to the character of Arnie, and that's what causes Arnie to do what he does in the movie. Now, that was the first act, and I loved the first act. The second act for me does slow down to a point to where it probably, in my opinion, became the least interesting act of all three Conjuring movies. The pacing is somewhat of a problem here, and it is kind of missing James Wan at that point because you're not getting that visual flair, or you're not even getting maybe as much important story as you're wanting to get. I liked Ed and Lorraine's storyline going in and trying to look for this girl, and that was interesting. But then when we go back to Arnie, he's just kind of contained into one area, and the characters that come in and try to help there, they're not as interesting as the Warrens. So when you separate those two things, it kind of causes the story to begin to crumble. It didn't entirely crumble because thankfully the third act got way more interesting, but I found the second act to just be a bit dull. Thankfully, it does pick up, and thankfully things become more fascinating when we encounter more of these entities, and the Warrens are having to do what they do. Flashback to the other side, still not quite there on that level because I'm just really engaged with the Warrens at this point. They could do anything and I would be interested. But at least one of the two storylines worked extremely well, and again, those consequences were quite there. So not as strong, not as tight as the other two Conjuring films, and I didn't find the story to be as engaging as we were going, even though the overall story and the idea of going and saying the devil made me do it, I think that may be the most interesting of all of them. It's just the execution in that regard wasn't quite there. But what are we here for? It's a horror movie. We're here for the scares. One thing that I will strike as a negative here is they do lean more into the jump scare here, and they may not be as effective as the previous two. We're kind of missing that building of intensity and not having to capitalize with the jump scare, but every now and then we will get one, and there were actually some, I want to call them creatures, but demons that we see that may be some of the scariest things we've seen in the franchise as a whole. Again, with the visuals here in this movie, I mean, the visuals are really, really good. The prosthetics, the makeup, all of that. So a little bit of good, a little bit of bad in that regard, but overall, I was still engaged with The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and it's one of those rare third movies in a trilogy, even though it's not the third movie in the franchise. It actually does quite a lot, and before I give you guys my score, I want to say thank you so much for watching, reviewing everything on streaming this weekend. Be sure to drop your thumbs up down below if you're excited for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. While this third entry is missing Wan's direction, there's still enough within this haunting story that will have fans of the franchise on the edge of their seats. I'm going a solid 68% with my score. I would consider this a good horror film. I am a sucker for this franchise, or at least for the three Conjuring movies. Some of the other ones, not so much. But yeah, it actually did quite a bit for me, and I enjoyed it maybe even more than I thought I would. So let me know down below, are you watching this film this weekend? Where are you watching it? HBO Max or in theaters? Would love to know all of those things. You guys the best. Come back because, of course, more reviews today. Next up, The Family Man, Season 2 on Amazon Prime. All right, guys. See you soon.